Hi everyone, welcome to the 4th episode of the Vegan Duet podcast. Before we get started on the main content of this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the Yulin Dog Meat Festival. So what is the Yulin Dog Meat Festival? It's a cultural festival that takes place in China, and it involves extremely cruel practices, as a result of which it became extremely controversial. For instance, it involved packing dogs into cages and loading them onto trucks where they were jostled around really violently and sustained a lot of injuries as a result. And finally, at the slaughterhouse, they were beaten to death with metal poles. Yeah, and obviously because of this cruel treatment of dogs, which are so loved by everyone, there were a lot of protests and public dissent expressed over the way that these dogs were treated and the Yulin Dog Meat Festival in general. And the festival organizers actually responded to the people who were dissenting against this. And they said that eating dogs are no different from eating pork or beef. And although they were trying to sort of use this as an excuse to continue to hurt these dogs and keep torturing them, there is some amount of truth in what they're saying. What really makes dogs different from pigs or cows or other animals that we choose to eat? Like, who makes this distinction between, okay, dogs and cats are going to be the ones that we love and we keep at home and we take care of them and show them our affection, but pigs, cows, and a lot of these other animals, okay, they're food, we're just going to mass breed them, and we don't really care about how they're treated. So who makes this distinction? The answer to this question is us. We're the ones that create this distinction. But what causes us to make it? The answer is years of cultural conditioning and influence by family, friends, and advertisers. So let's talk about how we've been culturally conditioned our entire lives. The reason that we care more about dogs and cats is because we believe them to be more morally superior than other species of animals. We have been brought up with the notion that dogs and cats are pets and their purpose is companionship for us. And in return, we show them affection, love, give them food, treats, and sort of give them a home to live in. And we also believe that dogs and cats deserve to be loved and shown affection as well. And this is why we often choose to adopt dogs over mass breeding them, because we know that there's a lot of pain and suffering that breeders put dogs through. So we choose to adopt over mass breed. But cows and pigs, on the other hand, we have no emotional connection with because we don't normally keep these animals as pets. So in our minds, we're used to thinking of these farm animals as food and not animals that we can emotionally connect with. And that's the reason why a normally cruel practice such as mass breeding would be acceptable in our eyes in their case. Mm-hmm. And what makes it even harder to make this emotional connection is often like labels that we give foods that are like animal products. For example, grass-fed, organic, local. This sort of just makes us feel better about the decisions that we're making to purchase these products. But in reality, these are just marketing gimmicks, and most animals, or actually all animals on farms, are eventually slaughtered and grow up in a very... The practices that involve getting the animal products from them are extremely cruel. Yeah. Like, no matter what kind of farm they're on, animals are still artificially inseminated. They still have their babies taken away from them, and cows in particular are milked until their bodies are essentially spent. Mm-hmm. And it's the same case with hens as well, except with eggs. Yeah, and male chicks are macerated alive, which it's insane. They just throw them in this huge industrial grinder alive, and because these male chicks aren't profitable to the industry, so they're just ground up like the moment they hatch. And so in general, male animals are considered byproducts, useless byproducts to be slaughtered within a few days of their birth sometimes, or else within a few months. And all animals in a farm eventually get slaughtered. There is nothing that will ever change that, and no number of labels or other marketing gimmicks will ever change that fact.
Yeah, and no advertisers ever show you the actual process of how your food gets from the animals to your plate. And the reason why is it would be very hard to support these industries if advertisers showed us the actual cruel process of how they have to slit the animal's throat in order for the meat to come to our plates.
And it's not just the slaughtering process that they don't show. They also don't show all the other cruel practices that we just mentioned, like artificial insemination, the cows being pregnant for basically most of their lives and having their babies taken away from them. This is what we don't see. And that's why we often tend to be skeptical when vegans, when vegans try to spread this message that the animal agriculture industry is in fact cruel, because we don't have any one-on-one experiences with a slaughterhouse. Most of us have never actually been to a real slaughterhouse, seen the animals get killed, or see them being exploited throughout their lives. We don't see this. We only see what the advertisers want us to see, and that's why we like believing these misconceptions. And also, we do tend to have a slight cognitive bias towards these marketing gimmicks because they show us what we want to see, and they show us that these animals are being treated well when in fact that is far from the reality of the situation.
Yeah, in fact, there's a label for that. It's called confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah, it's exactly. So when you want to believe something, you often just prefer to hear facts that support what you believe already.
Another thing that makes it really difficult to accept our own cognitive biases and try to make a real change in our lifestyles is societal pressure. And by this, I mean family and friends, because we're a very social species, human beings. We want to be able to fit in with our peers because this would, from an evolutionary perspective, increase our chances of survival.
And sort of what comes with that is also the family that we grew up in, right? What were their beliefs and what's their culture? That also strongly influences our behavior and our actions and our beliefs and our morals. And so from the moment that we are born, we just accept what our parents put on our plates. Often we don't ever question that, right? They serve us
milk and meat and eggs, and our whole lives we hold on to this notion that we need milk for calcium, we need eggs and meat for protein. And the reality is that we can get all of these nutrients from plants, but because of the household that we grow up in, we don't want to question these things that have been taught to us all our lives.
And we don't really even consider the fact that a lot of these beliefs that our family might hold might be outdated, just like some other beliefs that they may hold that we rebel against actively. So an issue with this is that a lot of the beliefs that our parents have, they probably got those beliefs from their parents, who got their beliefs from their parents, and it goes on and on, right? So a lot of these beliefs are very highly outdated and may not necessarily apply to right now.
There's always new scientific research popping up in favor of plant-based diets. They're the ones that can prevent and often reverse some of our leading diseases, such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, all of these diseases. And
our parents aren't nutritionists or doctors. They don't know a lot of the science behind nutrition, right? And we challenge them against so many of their other beliefs that we believe are outdated. But why don't we challenge what they put on our plates?
It would seem obvious that we would do this because we do know, technically that these animal products aren't cruelty-free and that they do involve cruelty to the animals. So why don't we actively talk to our parents about it, have conversations. That is what we should technically be doing as a form of sort of resistance or rebellion. Yeah.
Exactly, because in reality, we don't need cow milk any more than you need dog milk or cat milk or anything like that. And if we think about like drinking dog breast milk, that sounds ludicrous, right? But we also drink cow breast milk. Like, we're the only species on this entire planet that drinks another species' milk. And that milk is meant for their baby cows. Like, why are we drinking that? Are we baby cows?
Yeah, it makes no sense.
It doesn't make sense.
It's just the idea that the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. And that's the reason why we as vegans go vegan, because we understand, all of a sudden, sometimes like in a flash, that what we've been taught all our lives isn't necessarily right anymore and doesn't necessarily apply to us anymore. And when we realize this, it's like, oh my God, my whole life is a lie. And so, yeah, it's very enlightening to be vegan in that sense, because you get a whole new, fresh perspective on these things that you never even considered when you were still consuming dairy, eggs, meat, whatever it is. And so what we have to realize, and what we all technically know but don't really want to acknowledge for various reasons, is that dogs, cats, pigs, cows, chickens, all of them have the same level of sentience. And so when we give more moral value to, or when we claim that dogs and cats have more moral value than cows, pigs, and chickens, that would just be a blatant falsehood, because the reality is that they all feel the same amount of pain, they all feel the same amount of suffering, but most importantly, they can all love the same. And I think that's what vegans are trying to spread, and hope that other people will realize sooner than later, because what we need to acknowledge is that our cognitive dissonance, which is the psychological phenomenon of holding two different beliefs, that funds cruelty. And in this case, our cognitive dissonance refers to loving animals, or believing that cruelty towards animals is wrong. But on the other hand, we fund this cruelty by purchasing animal products,
which leads to the death of so many animals and so much suffering to animals.
And so we need to acknowledge this cognitive dissonance. We need to realize that these animals' lives are worth more than the products that we kill them for. And once we realize this, and once we see it from this perspective, we can take a step back and think about veganism as a real sustainable dietary option. So what would be the technical term for discrimination between species?
Speciesism. So speciesism is when one considers their own species or another species as more morally superior.
And a classic example of this, of course, would be the massive worldwide protest against the Yulin Dog Meat Festival, because as we know, that sparked a huge outrage. But the reality is that these exact same atrocities are often committed to animals in the animal agriculture industry on a daily basis, and more often they're far more cruel and brutal.
Yeah. Another topic that's given a lot of media attention is endangered species, or species that are about to go extinct. And I guess the idea behind that is that it's a very urgent situation and action needs to be taken in order to preserve these species, right? But why do we consider these species as more morally superior? The irony is that we worry about these species going extinct when the animal agriculture industry causes mass destruction to animals, mass killings, and a lot more lives are lost in the animal agriculture industry. And in addition, the animal agriculture industry is one of the leading causes of species extinction.
And the reason that animal agriculture is so horrible for all kinds of species around the world is the pollution, deforestation, and soil degradation that it causes. So we want to protect these endangered species, but we are indirectly supporting their endangerment or eventually their extinction
By purchasing these
by
animal
purchasing
products.
these products. Yeah. And I guess you could say that for the animals in the animal agriculture industry, it's far worse because not only do they have to die a horrible death, at the hands of slaughterhouse workers, they also have to live their entire lives being exploited for humans' personal gain. And this is something that the advertisers do not want us to know, and that these companies which sell these products do not want us to know. So they very strategically hide it from us. But this needs to be put out there more than it is. And this is what we are trying to do as activists.
Yes. I guess another thing we wanted to bring to light is just how evident this cognitive dissonance is in society today. And the way we're going to do that is actually just search for a few terms on Google and see what Google brings up.
What we need to remember also while we're doing these Google searches is that the results that show up the most at the top and the most frequently are the ones that people are clicking on the most, or that get the most attention from people. So we would encourage you to pay attention to that as well.
Okay, so let's search for a very general term, right? Animal cruelty. What gets pulled up when we search for animal cruelty? If we search on Google Images, almost the entirety of the first page of results is cruelty to dogs.
And sometimes, occasionally, cruelty to cats. It's only until we get to maybe the 7th or 8th or 9th row that we actually start seeing pigs in the picture, or horses, the occasional horse. But yes, I'm mostly seeing dogs, and this is kind of surprising to say the least, but it's also not that surprising when you consider that most people would consider only cruelty to dogs to be to comprise all of animal cruelty. And this again perfectly demonstrates that we don't consider using animal products as cruelty because this is just not, because that's just normal to us. That's just how we live our lives. We're brought up to think that these animal products are necessary for us, and if these animals don't get killed, then we will not get our nutrition, which could not be further from the truth. But this is what we have been fed all our lives, and this is the source of our cognitive dissonance and our speciesism, because we consider, firstly, dogs to be morally superior to other animals, and this causes us to be more sympathetic towards them. And that's why these images are showing up first and more frequently, because we click on them and we're outraged by them, and we feel strongly for them, but we probably wouldn't feel as strongly about pigs or cows or chickens, simply because of these beliefs that are rooted in us at a very early age.
Yeah, and this often sort of leads us to commodify these animals. So we view them more as products rather than animals or beings, right?
And whenever something is mass-produced, like animal products, they automatically become commodified at a global scale. And so when this kind of mass commodification happens, the profit that these products produce is valued far higher than the welfare of these animals. And so when these companies claim to care about animal welfare, that is a blatant lie, to say the least, because they don't really care about the animal welfare. They just care about the kind of the amount of profits that they're getting from these products. And so and another thing to remember is that these animals don't have a lot of laws protecting their welfare in the first place, and there are a lot of loopholes in the laws that already exist. So these companies will find a way to exploit these loopholes as much as possible in order to gain the maximum profit that they possibly can. And this, of course, diminishes animal welfare massively. And this is what we don't want to acknowledge.
Yeah, and I think something that's really sad about this entire situation is that the animals have no way of speaking up for themselves. They don't have a language to communicate with us. They don't have sort of way to tell us that they are in pain or that they do not want to be bred to be killed or used for their products, right? So our job or our mission as vegan activists is to act as a voice for these animals, to ensure that they have the rights that they deserve.
The right to live a life free from human-inflicted exploitation. And that's what we want to help people realize.
Yeah. I guess in conclusion, I hope that we've sort of given you a different perspective on morality and basically the lack thereof in the animal agriculture industry.
Yep. The important thing to remember is that most vegans weren't even born vegan. We made the transition to veganism when we realized our own cognitive dissonance, when we acknowledged that we were still supporting animal cruelty by buying these products, even though we didn't support animal cruelty on paper. And the only difference is that we made the change in our lifestyle and we aligned our actions with our morals.
Even if it's just the conscious decision of being in the grocery store in the aisle and seeing a vegan product and a non-vegan product and just making that decision to pick that vegan product and try it out, right? It's as simple as making small conscious steps like that.
Small conscious steps toward a vegan lifestyle will massively reduce the amount of animal cruelty that you contribute to, and it will greatly reduce your carbon footprint as well if you want to look at it from an environmental perspective. And there are plenty of health benefits that come from a whole food plant-based diet. So we urge you to try out veganism and try it out with the mindset that you are doing the animals a favor, you're doing the planet a favor, and you're doing your own health a favor as well.
And so if we can do it, so can you.